Hello, welcome in. My name is Erin or punkydumplin, whichever you want to call me. I go by both. And for today's video, I am doing a portrait of my sister when she was little, and this is actually another redraw. This particular picture was one of the first ever portraits that I tried to draw when I was in high school. And when I found the old photos and subsequently the old portrait, I was really excited about it, and I decided it was time for me to try and flex my portraiture muscles and see how much I've improved in the last 16 years. It was in 2004 that I did it, so. But, of course, with it being a portrait, I had to use a reference. And that's what I'm gonna talk about today, because for some reason, since the dawn of the internet, it seems, there has been this discourse in art communities about using reference. I first started seeing it happening back in like 2003, 2004 on DeviantArt, and it's discourse that I see constantly popping up on Twitter and things like that, which is just absolutely hilarious to me. But a lot of people are really, really heated about people not being allowed to use reference. I've heard people call it cheating, that, the people who are using references aren't using their actual creativity, so the stuff that they do is somehow less than artists that don't use reference. I've heard people say that people who use reference are untalented, or they're lazy artists and they're just trying to make a buck, or yada yada yada, all of this stupid crap. And my personal opinion about this, reference is incredibly important. You need to use references if you want to grow as an artist. Period. End of story. I really don't think there should be any debate about it. But because there is a lot of debate about it, and a lot of debate as to why, people seem to think that it's okay to talk down to artists who use reference, I'm going to give you my reasons for why I think reference is incredibly important. And the first thing that I believe reference helps with is in developing an artistic eye. When you're using reference, when you're doing life drawings, when you are drawing from a reference, be it live or from a picture, you are learning to develop how you see the world and how you break it down in your head to where you can put it on a piece of paper or on a canvas or on a computer screen, whatever it is you do. And this is something that I think a lot of people overlook when they talk about how quote-unquote bad references. I don't think I would have developed as an artist as much as I have if I hadn't started using reference more loyally. I also think that using reference can sometimes make the artistic process easier. And let's get real. Art is hard. Art's hard. Art is incredibly difficult. It's a skill that takes a lot of brain power. And, for me in particular, I only have so many brain cells to dedicate to art. So having things like reference makes my job easier. And if it's making my job easier, it makes it to where I can do more with my art. So, work smarter, not harder. Work smarter, not harder, guys. Also, like I said, I have a limited brain capacity. And as far as I know, most human beings do. And we can really only hold so much in our, in our brains when it comes to knowledge about art in terms of the processes we use, the mediums we use, what we know how to draw without a reference. And for me in particular, most of my quote-unquote art knowledge has to do with the human form. There are still things on the human form I'm not particularly great at. I suck at drawing feet. But having reference helps me in the fact that, now because I know how to use references, I can use them to draw things that are not in my wheelhouse. Say cars, or trees, or feet, or, horses, because for some reason I've been drawing a lot of horses lately. I'm a little bit concerned because I'm terrified of horses, but that's a story for another day. So, and my personal opinion is that even tracing, which is another real hot button issue for people, used in the correct context, tracing can also be an incredible tool to help you develop as an artist. Like one of the first things we did in my life drawing classes in college was we actually traced old paintings from the masters, because that way we could start seeing how, say, one particular one that I remember being really fascinated by was there was one particular painting where I was tracing over one of the bodies, and I finally started understanding how the calf muscles fit onto the bottom half of the leg. And it was because I was tracing it that I started to understand why it did what it did. And I think that's an incredibly important learning process that a lot of people are missing out on because they're being told that tracing and that tracing and reference are wrong. And now, as a caveat, there are areas where that is absolutely not okay. If you're tracing other people's work and trying to pass it off as your own, not cool, bro. None of that. None of that bullshit. But when it comes to learning the process, or if you are tracing pictures that you took yourself, like if you're working on, say, if you're working on a comic book, or if you're working on a portrait, or if you're working on, if you're working on something that isn't in your wheelhouse, it needs to be in the piece, and you trace a picture that you took yourself, I don't see the problem. Again, work smarter, not harder, guys. But again, I highly recommend that you have the rights to the picture by being the one who took it. So, but I've always found it really interesting that, a lot of people will talk about how awful references, but then we don't talk about the fact that, things like portraiture exist. And in portraiture, you have to have a reference. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do this piece without the reference that I used of my sister. So, it's just really interesting to me that we have such a weird dichotomy when it comes to art and reference and why it's not okay. And, I think some of the problem is the fact that a lot of people actually don't know how to use references. And perhaps at some point I will do a video showing how I use a reference and how I build off of the references that I find. Because it actually does take a little bit of learning and skill in order to use a reference appropriately. And reference isn't the only thing you need to learn in order to better yourself as an artist. Like for me, I've had to do a lot of study on muscle groups and stuff like that in order to use the references that I find more appropriately. And it's okay if you don't know how to use a reference appropriately, but telling other people that what they're doing is wrong because you haven't learned how to do it or anything like that, I think that's incredibly disingenuous. And it's also, really harmful to the art community as a whole. Personally. I think we need to really start looking into how we look at stuff like this, because, you know, especially now I see this a lot specifically with a lot of younger artists who are still just getting started. And, you know, as I said, when I was in high school and in the DeviantArt days, we had this same thing that was going around, and it was from people my age talking about how this was a problem and how this was bad. And, you know, it's, I don't know, there are entire careers that have been built off of using references and essentially tracing. I mean, it's ridiculous. But, you know, we need to start really thinking about this as a group and start really addressing the fact that we seem to find so much issue with a fundamental part of the process of learning art, in my personal opinion. You know, and as I said, you know, as I've gotten older, I use more reference than I did when I was first starting. And I personally thought it was going to go along the lines of, as I grew as an artist, I would use reference less and less. And actually, I use reference a lot more, but because I've learned how to use references and how to build on the references themselves, I think, you know, using reference more is just a natural jumping off point when it comes down to it. Because again, there's a lot of stuff I draw now that I did not draw in high school. In high school, I drew anime girls and anime girls and anime girls. And now I draw characters and creatures that I've created. And I draw, you know, things that involve multiple things. You know, if you're drawing a person with a horse head, you have to know how to draw a horse head. And as I said, I've been drawing a lot of horses lately. And drawing horses is hard. It's not easy. Drawing cars, not easy. Drawing, you know, and being able to reference stuff like that makes it to where I can do really cool art with those things, even though they're not in my wheelhouse. So, in summary, I'm gonna say, use reference. Reference is gonna help you out way more than it's gonna hurt you. You know, be careful about it. You know, don't try to pass off something that isn't yours as yours. But again, if it's pictures that you're taking yourself and stuff like that and using them as references, I don't see that as a problem in any way, shape, or form. And I use references all the time. In fact, for most of my bigger pieces, I'm usually pulling from between 15 to 30 references for a single piece, so that I can make sure that I know what the hell it is I'm drawing. And I think people need to just kind of chill the hell out about reference, because it's a good thing. It really is. I have some very strong opinions about this, especially because, you know, I've seen a lot of people who are really discouraged about doing art because they couldn't draw it without a reference. And to me, that's detrimental to the art community in and of itself. So, you know, we need to get a little bit better about that. You know, we want to see other artists grow, or at least I do. And personally, if that means they're using reference, let them do their thing. Let them enjoy their art. Let them learn how to do their art. So anyway, that is all for today. If you guys want to see me live, I stream on Twitch under punkydumplin. I'm live Thursday through Sundays, 8:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I am also on Instagram and Twitter. I have an Etsy if you want to support me there. All of the links to that will be in the description down below. But thank you so much for listening to me ramble about this. I love all your faces, and hopefully I'll talk to you guys next time.